Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's an absolute delight for me to be here today. I am the endorsed candidate for California Treasurer by the California Republican Assembly, which convened a couple months back and unanimously endorsed my campaign. I'm so thrilled. I wanted to share a little bit about my background and then share with you why I'm running for California Treasurer and why I think it's important to have an independent check and balance on a legislature run amok. But first, my quick story. I'm currently the mayor or city council member and former mayor in the city of Cudahy, which is a small town in southeast Los Angeles County. My city is 98% Hispanic, mostly Spanish speaking, and 90% Democrat. And it's against that backdrop that I have been consistently reelected as a candidate for city council, overwhelmingly on one occasion as the top vote getter in the recorded history of my city. Wow. And I've done that as a Republican, running on conservative values like balanced budgets and end to corruption, respect for private property, and promotion of traditional values. I was born and raised in the city of Guerrero, a very troubled region, a lot of corruption. My neighboring city, for reference, is Bell. Everybody remembers the case of Bell. The city manager paying himself $1.5 million in a town where the average income is $30,000 a year. A disgusting violation of the public trust. My own city had a corruption scandal. The dollar signs were a little bit smaller, but the conduct no less egregious. In 2013, I relocated back to the area from New York, where I was working for a large bank in finance and treasury functions. I passed through the family home thinking very naively at the time that I would spend a couple months before I realized what cool hip part of the West Side I would move to and carry on with my private life. But when the scandal happened in my city, I was very disappointed, and I resolved at that time that I would support a good candidate for city council, and I decided to wait and look, and before long I determined that there was nobody stepping forward. So I had to look myself in the mirror and determine whether this was the right moment for me to step forward and support my community. I was elected in 2013. I became mayor immediately. The first thing I did as a certified public accountant with knowledge of audit procedures and finance, I performed my own investigation of the city's internal controls and delivered a 10-page summary of findings to the California Controller demanding a forensic examination of my city. When the Controller ignored me, I went to the Los Angeles Times and demanded a forensic examination. They wrote an article about my endeavor, and shortly thereafter, the Controller came knocking on the door and delivered the authoritative internal control report that I was demanding. And it was important because I was about to unfold the greatest government reform measures in my city's history, and I needed the validation from an independent source. So I'm very proud of that endeavor. The other thing that I did early on that I'm also very proud of is that I got involved in areas outside the purview of the mayor. There were some failing schools in my city, and I decided that I would get involved. I was told, Jack, you're not a school board member. Stay away from the schools. But while this was not formally within my jurisdiction, it was certainly within my moral obligation to get involved. And I held public hearings on the quality of education in my local city council chamber during the scope of a city council meeting. And that effort led to the wholesale reform of one school's entire administration. So I'm very proud of that. Absolutely. And so now I'm running for California Treasurer. There are a lot of issues at stake. Very important that we have an independent watchdog. I talk about many of these, and we could go on for many, many minutes, but let me just highlight for you some of the issues that are very critical this round. One is pension reform. I talk about that extensively. Most politicians refuse to address pension reform because many of them are beholden to the public sector union bosses, and it's very politically inconvenient to argue for reform. But let me tell you, the Stanford University Economics Research Institute, and I'm partial to that institute because I went to Stanford, pegs the amount of the unfunded pension liability of this state at a staggering $1 trillion. For reference, the size of the annual budget in California, the general fund, is about $200 billion, which means that we could not shut down government overnight for the next 5 years and tax you several times over to recover from that gap. That is a staggering liability that we need to address, and we need to be truthful and transparent. The state treasurer sits on those public pension fund boards and can advocate for transparency in the way that we report that. Our credit rating is at the very bottom 20% of states. Only 6 states are worse than us, including Illinois, which is just about to fall apart for the same reasons that our state has a poor credit rating. So I want to address that head on, and I have endeavored, I commit herewith to visit every single committee in the state legislature during every budgetary cycle until they're blue in the face and they're tired and sick of seeing my face, to argue for financial transparency and proper management of our accounts. So you have that commitment for me. So I think I'll just wrap up, but I'm really thrilled about this opportunity. Let me also make one other comment about my community. My community, as I mentioned, is 98% Hispanic. This state is 40% Hispanic. Whether you like it or not, the road to recovery and the road to the red wave in California has to penetrate this demographic. There's no other way around it. I think I'm uniquely positioned to do that as a fluent Spanish speaker, as somebody who represents a Hispanic demographic. And I think if I can get past the primary, I will make significant inroads into this demographic. And I'm very excited because I think Hispanics are Republican, they just don't know it yet. And I intend to make that very clear. One last story. When I was 8 years old in the city of Guerrero, I became a Republican. I was 8 years old. It was during the era of Ronald Reagan, when patriotism meant something, and when it was so exciting to be American. That was my introduction to the Republican Party. And I remember in 1984, during the presidential election between Walter Mondale and Ronald Reagan, my teacher asked for students to step forward in a mock debate. One young lady providentially became the advocate for Walter Mondale, stood up and said, "I support Walter Mondale because my family is poor." I was selected to represent Ronald Reagan, and I stood up and retorted, "I support Ronald Reagan because I don't want my family to be poor." So just wanted to share that. Thank you all very much. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.